Hello and welcome back to the Movie Reviewers 100, a collaboration channel staffed by myself and 6 other gentlemen who are fans of cinema. And anyone who is a fan of cinema these days might be familiar with an actor by the name of Steve Buscemi, who is our theme this week. He is our actor that we are focusing on. We've already had a couple of good videos, one of which was on Fargo. Gosh, Ghost World. EJ did Ghost World. I was actually thinking of doing Ghost World myself because it's one of his more obscure films. But since EJ did it, I thought I'd talk about what probably is my favorite Buscemi movie and my favorite movie by this particular director, and that, of course, is Reservoir Dogs. Quentin Tarantino, the man himself, his very first movie, which was released in 1992. Buscemi, who up to this point had only just appeared in small parts in films. He was Chet the bellhop in Barton Fink, and the year before that he was in another Coen Brothers film called Miller's Crossing, which was outstanding, as Mink, who is a crucial figure in the plot, even though he really only appears in one scene. I think that's like the fastest Steve Buscemi has ever spoken in his career. You know, the words come out of his mouth so fast, it's crazy. One thing that I've noticed that Buscemi is particularly good at is complaining. His characters love to complain, and he's really, really, really great at it. In Dogs, the opening scene, of course, has him talking about how he doesn't like to tip people, and why. Everyone's really irritated him, but he's just irritated by the whole notion of tipping. His character, of course, is Mr. Pink. It's a code name. Most of the main characters have code names in this movie because they're going to be pulling off a robbery of a jewelry store. And the boss, Joe Cabot, who's played by the late Lawrence Tierney, doesn't want them to know each other personally so that they can't inform on each other if any of them gets caught by the police. So he's assigned them all code names. They all know him as Joe, and they know his son, Eddie, who's played by the late Chris Penn. But they don't really know each other. So you've got Harvey Keitel playing a guy named Mr. White, whose real name is Larry Dimmick. You've got Michael Madsen playing a guy named Victor Vega. He could be the brother of Vincent Vega, John Travolta's character from Pulp Fiction. Of course, that's never been made explicit. At one point, Tarantino was saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool to do a Vega Brothers movie? But, you know, that's not really possible now, I don't think. The characters have sort of aged past the point where it could possibly be believable, given what happens to both of them in each of their respective movies. You have Tim Roth's character, Freddie Newendike, who is codenamed Mr. Orange. And you've also got, in addition to Buscemi as Mr. Pink, you've got a couple of minor characters who are known as Mr. Blue, that's played by Eddie Bunker, and of course Mr. Tarantino himself as Mr. Brown. I found it kind of ingenious that he includes himself in the core group of criminals because he gets billing up front with all those guys, whereas a couple of guys with actually bigger roles, such as Randy Brooks as a undercover cop, are relegated to the after title credits, even though Randy Brooks has way, way, way more scenes than Tarantino does. Actually, Tarantino says the very first lines in this film, when he's talking about Like a Virgin by Madonna. He's the first person to speak, so he has the first lines in his very first movie. He was planning on making a movie before this called My Best Friend's Birthday. And there's actually a few bits of it that have been uploaded to YouTube without his permission, I think. But his first completed feature film was Reservoir Dogs. Now, one thing that's interesting about the core group of characters is that Mr. Pink is the only guy who you never really see any of his backstory. You don't ever learn his real name. You don't have a flashback showing how he joined up with Cabot's crew. The other 3 guys, Mr. White, Mr. Orange, Mr. Blonde, they all have their own flashbacks. But Mr. Pink does not. He is a mystery. And what happens to him after the movie is over is also a mystery. You find out what happened to all the other guys, but not him. Who knows what could have... He might have gotten killed as soon as he left the building. We don't know. But Buscemi, you know, is a guy obviously whose career was made by this movie. You know, even the Coen Brothers kept using him. You know, he might not have the reputation that he has if he weren't in Reservoir Dogs. And the strange thing is that he only worked with Tarantino one other time, at least in a Tarantino movie. The two of them, Tarantino and Buscemi, were also actors in the Robert Rodriguez film Desperado, but they didn't have any scenes together. And I'm not really sure why they haven't worked together since then, but they haven't. But Buscemi is so great in this movie. He's a world-class nag, and always harping on the guys for acting unprofessionally, you know, and reminding them not to reveal personal information about each other, and being the most pragmatic of the bunch. But the cast is truly, truly outstanding. We get a little taste of what each of them are like from the opening scene, which takes place in a diner. And I had to basically, I went back and actually looked at the scene again. I've seen the movie dozens of times. Me and you know, a few friends of mine, we've seen it so many times, it's crazy. And I know a lot of the dialogue by heart. But I went and watched the opening diner scene again because I remember all the guys wearing their black suits. When they commit the jewelry store heist, they are all dressed identically. They're all wearing sunglasses, they all have black suits, white shirts, black ties. And they're wearing these same outfits in the scene where they're having breakfast in the morning. They're not talking about the robbery at all. They're talking about anything but the robbery. You have no idea. If you put this movie in and watch the first scene, you have no idea that it would be about a robbery. But Chris Penn is wearing the same blue jacket that he wears in the rest of those scenes that take place after the robbery. And Joe, Lawrence Tierney, is wearing the same, you know, dark-colored polo shirt that he wears in the opening scene. So that scene basically takes place prior to the jewelry store heist, as they're all sort of hanging out, relaxing, having coffee and breakfast before that thing begins. And of course, when I first saw this movie, I had no idea who Tarantino was, you know, and the people who saw the movie first when it came out in Sundance that January or February, they had no idea who Tarantino was either. He just came out of nowhere, and it was like, bam, man, you know, here's one to watch out for, you know. All the Sundance movies are all like relationship dramas, you know, and talk heavy, and Reservoir Dogs is talk heavy as well, but it's primarily a thriller, I guess you could say, although it doesn't feel like a thriller most of the time. They have some special features on this disc and the Pulp Fiction disc as well. Actually, I looked at the Pulp Fiction disc a couple nights ago, and they actually had a special taken from the Siskel and Ebert show. Unfortunately, both Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert aren't alive anymore, but they had done a special after Pulp Fiction had come out, talking about how Pulp Fiction was so much better than Reservoir Dogs, and how Reservoir Dogs is just sort of an exercise in style. And they were praising Pulp Fiction for the fact that it was so unconventional, and that they would show you scenes of things happening that aren't in ordinary crime pictures. And I'm like, hello, Reservoir Dogs did that too. Look at the opening diner scene. They never talk about the heist in that thing. They're all just hanging around talking about music and about tipping and everything like that. No word of the heist at all, okay? And there's an even better scene later on, a scene I even like even more, in which Tim Roth, Keitel, Buscemi, and Chris Penn are all driving the car on their way to a meeting, and they're just talking about stuff, you know. They're just talking about a television show, they're talking about actresses. Chris Penn's telling them a story about the woman who used wacko glue on her abusive boyfriend, which is like one of the funniest things in the entire movie. How would you like it if every time you had to take a piss you had to do a fucking handstand? And, you know, everyone was roaring, including the guys in the car on screen. That has nothing to do with the heist. And it seems strange that they would say that they didn't like Reservoir Dogs because it's just an exercise in style, whereas they did like Pulp Fiction. And I can only assume this is because Pulp Fiction took even more risks, I think, with its structure. And also it has some moralizing, it has some redemption qualities to it. You know, but Reservoir Dogs is like, heck with all that, man. Heck with all that. It's a down and dirty heist movie, you know, with characters that talk tough, you know, and lots of guys getting killed or you know, badly injured in various painful ways. The standout scene for me, though, of the whole picture is the one in which the undercover cop, because one of the guys, the reason why everything goes wrong in the jewelry heist is because one of the team members is actually a police officer who's planning on busting everyone, especially Joe, who's the head of the whole thing. Now, it is a crime if you have not seen this movie already. It really is, okay? You need to, you know, I don't care how much you like Inglourious Basterds and Django or Kill Bill or Pulp Fiction, what have you, you know, if you haven't seen Reservoir Dogs, you are committing a crime against yourself. So, see the movie. But in case you haven't, you want to keep watching, I won't tell you which guy the cop is. But I will say that his character, in his flashback, you see him preparing for his job by practicing what they know called the commode story. And because he isn't a real criminal, he's a cop, he has to invent a fake criminal history for himself, including anecdotes about jobs that he pulled in the past. So the anecdote as he practices it is really, really exciting because first he's just basically reading off a piece of paper. The cop that he's working with basically was coaching him. He's giving him this story and he says, you can personalize this any way you want, but just try and remember the basics of it so you can tell it like it's something that actually happened to you. So first you see him practicing it, going over the lines, making mistakes, and then you see him practicing it for the cop, and then you see him actually performing it for the other guys as they're sitting around in a bar. Now the story as you hear it is progressing as he tells it. It isn't like every time there's a new scene it's starting over from the beginning again. But when it gets to a certain point in the story, then you actually see it dramatized on screen, as though it was something that actually happened, that we're watching on screen as an event that actually was a flashback like any other. But of course it's not. It's simply a dramatization of the fake criminal story that he's telling you guys. And then during that bit, there's a side character within his story that starts telling his own story, which is crazy, because you sort of start taking that literally, but then you have to stop and go, wait, all this is made up. This guy doesn't exist, his story doesn't exist, it's all just made up. It's really, really a genius sequence, probably my favorite scene from any Tarantino movie, and Reservoir Dogs is my favorite Tarantino movie. Absolutely. It's the one movie of his that actually comes in under 2 hours, unless you count Kill Bill Volume 1. I don't think Tarantino does because he considers both Kill Bill movies to be one big long movie split in two. I wish he would do something short and sweet like this again, but I don't think he will. He seems really intent on making big, long movies, you know, or going into television, doing miniseries, all kinds of stuff like that. You know, he just wants to, and that was, I thought, one of the primary reasons why I didn't like Django Unchained, because it just went on for a really, really, really long time. But it's one of Buscemi's best movies, and it's definitely Tarantino's best movie. That's it for now. Oh, I just want to mention that there's deleted scenes on this that were cut for good reason. However, the actress Nina Shamaska, who plays another cop in this movie that meets with the other two cops, must be really pissed off that she was cut out of this movie because her entire character is not seen in the final cut, just in deleted scenes. It's really too bad. The other extras, this is a 15th anniversary edition, so it's got a few things on here, but I haven't looked at it. Because every time I put in this disc, I'm like, why bother with all that extra stuff when I can be watching the movie? Same with Batman Begins. That is my review for Buscemi Week. We've got a new theme starting tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching. And remember, if you haven't seen Reservoir Dogs, you are committing a crime against yourself. See it now. Later.